Hello guys. In today's episode, I interview Aaron, who is a registered dietitian and the founder of Backcountry Foodie. And in this episode, she dives into some really interesting subjects around nutrition for the trail and in particular, nutrition for longer distance hiking. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about your nutrition and how it can best help you on the trail, I really do think you'll enjoy this episode. So let's get into it. Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. All right, welcome, Aaron. Very excited to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So for the listeners, we've been back and forth for probably maybe a year and a half now or something. It's been a long time since we first connected.
It's been a long time
about this episode. So I'm stoked that it's finally happened because I love your stuff and I love what you do. And yeah, I've got some really interesting questions to dive into today. So I think to kick things off, just for people obviously who haven't heard of you and what you do, could you just talk us through who you are, where you're from, and what exactly is it that you do?
Sure. My name's Aaron Owens Mayhew. I'm a registered dietitian and an ultralight long distance backpacker. And I think it's kind of funny that you asked me where I'm from because I've been living full time in a Sprinter van for almost 2 years now with my husband and our dog. So it's a good question. We don't really have a from or where we call home right now. So originally, I guess you could say I was from Kentucky, but spent most of my adult life in Seattle, Washington, which is where we were just prior to moving into our van in April of 2019. And what I do, when leaving my job, I had a midlife crisis back then. I decided to thru-hike the Pacific Crest Trail. And in preparing for that, I realized that the whole traditional hiker diet wasn't going to work for me. So I started kind of tinkering around with food as a dietitian would, and ended up developing my own meal planning style, which I call ultralight meal planning. And that has since turned in over the last couple of years to a full-time job. My husband and I both do it now online. It's an online platform for recipes and meal planning for backpackers.
So based off all that, with this transitioning from something you've done for yourself into, a full-time job, do you have any particular, philosophies which you really do believe in, so that you base off everything for this nutrition for your long-distance hiking?
I really have learned that nutrition really plays a huge part in hikers' diets. And unfortunately, I think historically hikers have just kind of thrown things in their bag, following the 2 pounds per day rule, grabbing things off the shelf that are really easy, what I call the traditional hiker diet of like Pop-Tarts and ramen and instant potatoes. Those things are just that are all really easy. However, nutritionally, I just don't think they're as maximized. So there tends to be that general belief for thru hikers that you're going to lose a lot of weight, and that's just acceptable. That's just part of it. But unfortunately, I don't think that's exactly the case. That I think you can really maintain your weight, get really strong, recover really well, and actually finish your hike really fit without being emaciated at the end, just by choosing better foods.
So what do you think is the most common mistake that you do see from long distance hikers with their nutrition?
Like I said, I think it has a lot to do with that golden 2 pounds of food per day rule that folks have followed forever and ever, because there's so much variability that can go into that 2 pounds worth of food. You could have 2 pounds worth of fresh food versus 2 pounds of, like I was saying, I have this ultralight meal planning diet that I've maximized every single bite of food to where I actually can get the same calories in 1.5 pounds of food instead of having to carry that 2 pounds. So I think a lot of hikers kind of miss out on maximizing their nutrition just by weighing their food out rather than actually looking at the food labels and paying a little more attention to what's actually in their food. So I think that's kind of where people struggle.
So based off that, if a hiker is traditionally doing the 2 pounds of food, approach, so you're saying that it's a better approach to sort of look at what's actually in the food and think a little bit deeper beyond just how much it weighs.
Correct. Yes. So taking a little more time and looking at like how many carbs maybe you're eating a day. Are you eating enough to kind of get you through and what kinds of carbs. Are you eating complex carbs that are going to sustain your energy a lot longer than simple carbs, which are like a lot of the Sour Patch Kids or hiker favorite? They're going to give you a quick boost of energy, and they're going to fill up that hiker bag. That's for sure. I made the mistake of buying a pound of Sour Patch Kids once on the Appalachian Trail, and it was a disaster. And so just having those kinds of things, make sure to do that, and make sure you have protein in your food so that you're going to recover really well and feel better. That hiker hobble is less of a problem when you're through hiking. So I think it really needs to be more paying attention to what's in your food versus how much it weighs.
So building off that, like, so you mentioned the carbohydrates and you mentioned the protein there. Are there any other nutrition priorities that a hiker does need to cover when they're sort of tackling a longer distance hike?
Thru hikers specifically are more at risk for vitamin and mineral deficiencies. A weekender, not so much, because you're not going to be out there for that long. But I don't know if many thru hikers realize that the process of dehydrating food actually can reduce the vitamins in it by 50%. Whereas the freeze drying process retains 97% of the nutrients. So depending upon those types of foods that you choose, you may actually end up with iron deficiency. I believe somebody last year ended up with scurvy because of a vitamin C deficiency. So I think that's another step that hikers could pay a little more attention to. Load up on fruits and veggies when you go into town, along with that burger and beer. So instead of having like a big bowl of ice cream, also load up on those other things. So because being iron deficient, that could send you home early. And that's completely, I mean, you could prevent that by just eating the right kinds of foods.
And just to touch on that, like that story of someone, I think, I even heard there was a couple of people who might have gotten scurvy. It was crazy. Like, it was really bizarre to think that was, happening on the trail. So just on those 2 points, like, if someone, to be aware of what actually goes into it, what does someone have to eat to avoid scurvy? And what does someone have to eat, or what type of things would someone have to eat to, potentially maintain their iron, like, just as a generalization?
Well, scurvy's from vitamin C. So just eating any citrus fruits. I mean, going into town, having an orange or a bowl, my favorite thing to do is I love just going in by the grocery store and buying one of those like already pre-cut fruit bowls and just downing the whole thing at once. So just doing those kinds of things, or even just some of the energy bars, maybe reading the labels to see if there's some extra vitamin C in those, the ones that have fruit in them. You could get it in that way. It doesn't take that much really to get it in. And then iron is dependent upon your age and your sex. So there's a couple different things, but I love eating beans on trail. So eating beans, trying to think in town, if you were to have like a spinach salad to get some iron, if you're a meat eater, I'm vegetarian, but if you're a meat eater, having like freeze-dried beef and those kinds of things, just thinking about kind of where you get those sources at home and just having those on the trail with you.
I often see long distance hikers, a big thing in the hiking community when people are talking about nutrition is really, really trying to emphasize the fats in their trail food, because of sort of nutrient density to weight ratio, and, fats are, carrying a lot of calories for their weight. If a hiker really is trying to get the best bang for their buck in their weight, and I know we sort of touched on it before, but how do they actually go about striking that right balance between food groups?
And this is so popular with the ultralight backpacking community. So I'm really having a hard time getting to some of these folks because they're so focused on gram counting. And I'm one of those, being an ultralight backpacker. Yes, so fat does contain over twice as much calories per gram than carbs and protein. However, the important thing is that they all have their own job. So fat is a really great source of fuel for like slow, long burning energy for kind of less intense hikes. So it really does have a good purpose. But then you do need carbohydrates for, like I said, the complex carbohydrates are going to be longer burning, whereas simple carbohydrates like sugar and candy is going to give you that quick boost to get up the mountain if you're really struggling. So they have their own point in the day. Then there's the protein, like I mentioned before. It's like you need that to be able to recover. You're stressing your muscles day after day after day. So, and then like I was saying before, some of these hikers are so emaciated because of their calorically deficient. Well, being calorically deficient means you're also not eating enough protein. So you're eating up your muscles. So that's something to really keep in mind. So that's kind of where my meal planning comes in, is that once you meet your carbs and a protein goal, as much fat as you want to add on top is totally fine. But you need to meet your carbs and protein first to be able to continue performing as a hiker for 5 and 6 months at a time.
And then if someone was trying to, just a layperson was trying to figure that out for themselves, because I know the hikers love to plan this stuff out by themselves, and they were trying to figure out, how many carbs, how much protein I need to be eating. How would they go about that? What are the first steps?
So it's based on your weight, but the general guideline, just to really simplify it to get you started, is your body can really only utilize 60 grams of carbs per hour. And it's really easy to read food labels on your energy bars and on the food packages. So you can kind of really get a really quick idea of what you're eating per meal and per snack, because your body can really only use those 250 calories at a time from those foods. And then similar kind of thing with protein, your body can really only use 20 grams of protein at a time. So when you're having meals, just make sure you have at least 60 grams of carbs, at least 20 grams of protein, and you're at least meeting the minimums. And then fat, like I said, just fills in all the blanks, the extra amount of calories that you want. If you really want to dig deep into it, looking at grams per kilogram of carbs and protein, the general recommendation for thru-hikers is anywhere from like 6 to 8 grams of carbs per kilogram per day. So that can give you like the big picture of how many carbs you need to eat in the whole day. And then I just split that up into 3 meals and all my snacks, or whatever your meal plan is for you that works the best. And then for protein, similar kind of thing. It's 1.2 grams per kilogram for the entire day. And then a similar thing, break that up into your meals and snacks. And then you kind of have a good idea that you're going to at least meet your baseline.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, and if, say, someone was really, really opposed, or they just really struggle with numbers and they look at like, a gram to calorie thing and they just go right. Cross-eyed. Is there anything else, any other approach or any other sort of way you might be able to kind of figure that out without actually diving into the numbers?
I think it's just remembering those two numbers, 60 and 20, 60 carbs, 20 protein, and reading your food labels. I mean, it's probably the easiest way to do it. And then once you kind of get an idea, most energy bars usually have probably at least 30 to 45 grams of carbs in them. And you typically eat one of those an hour. So I think you just kind of, once you start paying attention to what's actually in your food bag, that goes back to that point of not just throwing in 2 pounds worth of food and just looking at the labels, you really get a feel for what you're eating. And then you'll notice too, based on how you're feeling. So maybe you need a little more protein because you're sore in the morning. So you'll kind of fine tune it for yourself.
Yeah, nice. And I always find that type of stuff, it's definitely a learned skill. Like, I'm personally very opposed to numbers, like not because I'm opposed to my clients, but for me, I look at a number, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is my job, but like I can't deal with it. But it's like, it's very much a learned skill where you go through the process and you teach yourself and you take a little baby steps. And as you said, you focus on the important things and it gets a lot easier and easier. So yeah, I like that because that sort of resonates with me. So if someone does struggle with digestion, and this is sort of a subject that's come up quite a bit recently, for a lot of hikers that I've been talking with, and they've struggled with a bit with digestion while they're actually eating. So they find, food sits in their belly, it takes a little while to process, and they struggle while they're doing that and actually hiking at the same time. What advice could you give them to help ensure, they're getting enough energy and enough fuel, but obviously staying as relatively comfortable to actually hike along and have a good time?
My recommendation in that situation is meal replacement drinks. It's something I truly believe is underutilized because you can get the right amount of nutrition, an entire meal, in only 8 ounces worth of volume of fluid. It's just, again, having the know-how of those kinds of recipes, which is one thing I specialize in as a dietitian, is I've created recipes that will give you 600 calories, 35 grams of protein, like everything. And a lot of them even have all the vitamins and minerals you need. So they work really well if you're hiking at altitude and you've just lost your appetite, or maybe you have giardia and you just can't eat anything. Or I get tired of just chewing when I'm having to eat 6,000 calories a day. Just the thought of eating more food is just too much. So I drink my nutrition. And you can sip on it. So it's one of those things where you don't have to eat a full meal. And like you just said, having it sit in your belly for hours. It's something you could sip over a couple hours or so. So I think that tends to really help people a lot if they kind of consider something like that.
And just to give a little, paint a picture of this, if someone was, you don't have to get into specifics around what actually goes into it, but if someone was putting a meal replacement drink together on the trail, what does it actually look like? Obviously, you don't have a blender, you don't have, all the creature comforts at home. How would a hiker go about that?
It's actually really easy. I'm not sure about the products you have where you are, but here in the US, we have my favorite one is my chocolate peanut butter shake. I've not met a hiker yet that doesn't like it. So it's super easy. You can buy all the ingredients at the grocery store. You can make it while you're through hiking there at a hostel or where you are. All it is whole milk powder, peanut butter powder, and the Carnation Breakfast Essentials, the little chocolate powder that has all the extra vitamins and minerals. That's all it is. I believe it's a half cup of the milk, a third cup of the peanut butter, and just one of the packets of the chocolate. And that's what I was talking about. 600 calories, 35 grams of protein, all in, add a little bit, 6 to 8 ounces of water, and you're done. So it's super easy. It doesn't require any specific like machinery or anything. You don't have to dehydrate it. It's all dry ingredients.
Yeah, how good.
And really cheap. It doesn't cost much. I think it's less than $1 per serving.
Wait, the dream. And then how would when someone's hiking along, is that something they'd keep in a water bottle, or how would they, what would they store that in?
So I personally like to keep them in my hip belt pocket as a snack to kind of get me through the afternoon. So I just put them in a Ziploc baggie. So the same kind of baggies that you're putting any of your other food in, they can go in that. I drink right out of the baggie rather than having to stop and put it in a jar or a cup or something that I have to also clean. Being an ultralight hiker, I don't like doing any extra steps that I don't have to. So I put the water in the bag, shake up the bag, and lots of times I don't even stop walking. I pull it out of my hip belt pocket and just pour in the water, drink, and keep moving. But I keep it as kind of my emergency thing when I feel like I'm getting ready to bonk, or shoot. I should say hitting the wall. I know bonk's not a good word for you guys. I recently learned that. So hitting the wall. So that, or if I feel like I need to eat something, I'm not quite to camp yet, but I know I'm really going to struggle getting to camp without it, then I'll drink one then. So I find that they're really handy.
So let's talk about caffeine and coffee, because this is something I've talked about, a bit on the podcast, because I love a bit of coffee. I love a bit of caffeine as a performance aid, whether it's in your training, but actually on the trail. But obviously, the people react to caffeine a little bit differently, and some hikers out there are definitely slow digesters of caffeine. And if they have a coffee or anything after midday, they end up being up all night and just jittery as anything. If you're in the situation where you're like, look, in the afternoons, I'm aware I'm getting a little bit fatigued and I need a bit of a kick, but I can't rely on coffee or caffeine because that's going to ruin my sleep. What else could a hiker turn to give them that little boost?
I would say, well, depending on how long you need that boost. If you need a quick boost just to kind of get you up a climb, versus needing a boost to get you into camp that's still another 3 miles away. A quick boost, I would suggest like simple sugars that are going to digest really quickly, 30 to 60 minutes. That would be like some candy, some gummies. That's the perfect time for Sour Patch Kids. To have some gummies, those kinds of things, or any kind of like dried fruit or something that has some concentrated sugar. But if you're needing a boost to get you into camp that's still maybe an hour longer away, looking at maybe a lower fat bar, because the fat makes you burn longer, slower digestion. So maybe something with higher carbs in it that's going to digest a little bit quicker, but not as fast as like a piece of candy would. And that would be like an energy bar. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, and that's pretty straightforward. Most people will be able to do that. And yeah, that's great.
Nothing complicated. It's actually, nutrition is really quite easy once you have the little bit of know-how. The way I like to talk to hikers is take your home diet into the backcountry with you. Whatever is working well at home will work well for you there. There's absolutely no reason to completely switch your diet. And a lot of people work really hard on eating healthy at home. So why switch to a lot of processed foods on trail when that's not something your body's used to? When again, it just takes a little know-how. So just to know like how to choose home foods in the dehydrated form.
And then like on that point, let's build on, you sort of mentioned health there. And I know we talked about that, touched on a little bit earlier in the podcast, but if a hiker was generally wanting to maintain their health over a long distance hike, because obviously even picking up a cold or a flu or anything is, a nightmare when you're doing something like that. Are there any sort of nutrition strategies which you can help do to help there?
Similar to kind of what I was just saying, is if you're trying to eat a healthy diet at home that has a lot of variety in it, you're going to meet all those vitamins and minerals that are going to keep your immunity up. So similar thing is keeping a varied diet in your backpack. Instead of eating like only Snickers every day or only a rice side every day or only eating, ramen every single day. If you switch it up, you're going to get different vitamins and minerals from different sources of food. And again, like I mentioned, if you're not able to do that because dehydrated food is so low in vitamins just because of the process that it goes through, load up when you go into town. I mean, have that burger and beer, but also maybe have a salad on the side or a bowl of fruit or something like that to kind of make up the difference that you're missing out on trail.
Yeah, for sure. On top of all this, obviously we bounced around between a few different subjects today and we covered some really good stuff, which I think will help a lot of people. But is there anything else that we haven't really covered today? Anything else you wanted to sort of add or thought might be important, to build off any of this subjects?
I think a lot of it, again, going over with the calorie, that I think people should not focus so much on that and think of nutrition as a whole. I think will make a big difference in performance, because I truly believe that if you have better nutrition, your overall experience is going to be better. The likelihood of finishing the trail is going to be better because like we were talking about somebody having scurvy, that's completely preventable. So I think that's just something with the change in mindset that the overall outcome and likelihood of finishing is going to be better with a little extra know-how.
Yeah, absolutely. And the listeners who are on this podcast are all about that. So you've definitely come to the right place to talk about having a better experience because, I'm sure everyone can appreciate that point.
And one other thing I like to think about is we spend so much time thinking about our gear that if we spend just a half of that amount of time on thinking about our food, that the overall experience too is going to be better, that you're going to be better prepared. You would never go out on the trail without the right jacket or the right backpack or the boots. So why should we go out with food that's not going to be good for us? It's kind of another thought that I have.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more on that point. So now, I'd love for you to take this opportunity just to tell us a little bit more about your business and exactly what you do to help hikers, because you do some really amazing things and you've touched on some really cool points today. So can you just tell us a little bit more about how everything runs on your side of things and how you go about it?
Well, like I said, our company's called Backcountry Foodie. We're at backcountryfoodie.com. And I know a lot of things like you're talking about today, all the numbers and the planning can feel really overwhelming. So my job as a dietitian is to simplify all that for you. Because I love the numbers. I love all the planning. This is something I enjoy and I'm good at. So I love helping hikers take all this stress away from the food and the planning. So our site is actually built to provide you not all the recipes, but 175 recipes that have already been pre-maximized for you. I figured out how many carbs that are in there. I figured out all the protein. I figured out that fat ratio to keep you energized. I figured out ones that have the, getting complicated again, antioxidants and the anti-inflammatory foods. So I figured all that out for you to make sure that you're going to recover well. So I've taken all that guesswork out for you. And then part of the site too is a meal planning site where we figured it out to where you pick all those favorite foods that you really enjoy and you just drag a drop into the meal plans. And with that, we do all the math for you. We add up all the calories. We add up all the carbs. We do all that for you. We add up how much it weighs. So you don't even have to put it on a scale to weigh 2 pounds. The site does it all for you. It tells you how much water you need to carry. Because that's the next thing too, is you kind of have to think about, am I hiking in a desert? Is something that takes 900 meals per day to make the food going to be a problem if I only have access to X number? So we do all that work for you. I offer master classes because I really enjoy teaching. So I offer all kinds of classes where the one I'm getting ready to do right now, which is what's funny about the bonking, is that it's actually titled How to Maximize Nutrition and Avoid Bonking. And I'm now changing it to Avoid Hitting the Wall. So I'm giving that talk this Saturday. And then we have another one coming up that's for beginner backpackers. So just simplifying the whole process again of being able to look at things in an easy way. And then we also have a forum that's led by myself as a dietitian, a dietitian that works for us. So we're in there kind of answering questions you have about things if you're struggling with, what do I need to eat on this trip? Or what dehydrator do I need? What vacuum sealer? Any of those sorts of questions. We're in there helping you with that. So again, the whole point of the site is to just take all that stress away and help you spend less time figuring all that out on your own and more time outside.
Fantastic. Well, what I'll do is I will leave a link for that in the show notes down below, just so people can check it out. And if anyone did want to have a look at your stuff on social media as well, where can they find you there?
We're on Instagram at Backcountry Foodie, as well as Facebook, and we have a small YouTube channel that we're working on building more with a few videos on it. So we're actually filming starting tomorrow if the weather cooperates with us. We do film outside because we live in a small van, so it's kind of weather dependent when we can film. But we are going to get that up and going too. So those are the primary places that you can find us.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll leave a link to all of those in the show notes below. So if anyone did want to check out Aaron and have a look at what the stuff she does and potentially get involved, just follow that link and you'll be able to sort yourselves out. But thank you so much for coming on today, Aaron. I feel like we covered some really, really good subjects and, shared, some really interesting knowledge, which will help a lot of people. So I'm stoked that we finally made this happen. I'm stoked that you got involved and yeah, I think it's been a really good episode. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.